So sometimes in theater, we are asked to do a little bit of injury makeup. So injury makeup could be anything from just a couple of bruises that somebody could have, or it could be a wound that you have to create, or a prosthetic that you have to put on. There's kind of like an entire world of things that could be possibilities. So I just want to kind of briefly discuss these things, and then I'll make other videos where it would be demos of these actual products. So some things that you really have to think about when you are creating injury makeup effects for theater in particular is you really have to think about timing. That's probably one of your most important things. So you need to make sure that whatever effect you're doing, you understand how much time you have to put it on and also how much time they have to take it off. So if this is something that they have time to put it on before the show starts and they have time to take it back off after, then it's not as big of a deal and you can kind of budget for that. But if this is something that has to happen during a quick change, you have to make sure that you are giving adequate time for this, because you don't want to put on this really complicated makeup and then they have 30 seconds to take it off and they can't get it off. So always kind of think about that. You need to think about what is the injury that you're doing, how was it created, where on the body is it going to be. All of those things are going to affect how it looks. What was it made with? That's also important because that can kind of affect how things like cut and bruise and just how they look in general. You kind of have to take into account what is the lighting going to be like. That can kind of make a big difference for how your makeup could look. Lighting, as we learned earlier in this class, or if you've watched my other videos, lighting can make a big difference in how things look. So if you're doing an injury makeup, just like all your other stage makeups, make sure that you are testing it in the light that it's going to be seen in, just because sometimes colors just don't look the same when they're under certain lights. And then a lot of times too, I feel like the lighting situations that occur with injury makeups on stage are sometimes a little bit more dramatic and intense because those tend to be the more intense moments in a production. So sometimes things that you're doing get kind of drowned out by the lighting. So just kind of make sure that you're aware of that. You also want to think about what is the progression of this injury going to be. So is someone going to get a black eye in the beginning of the show and then we're going to see it through a week's worth of time? Are we going to see this cut heal? Is this surgery going to heal? Whatever it is, you also have to keep that into account, because as injuries heal and time goes on, they do start to look different. So there's a lot of different things that you have to take into consideration, just like if you were designing any other aspect of theatrical makeup. So don't think just because it's injury makeup and it seems so different that it is super different, because it's really not. You have to take all of the other things into consideration. Also too, safety and allergies, that's something else you really have to think about. A lot of special effects products are going to be a little bit more intense than some of your regular theatrical makeup is, so it's important that you are allergy testing the people that you're working on. Liquid latex and latex prosthetics are used a lot. A lot of people are allergic to latex. A lot of people don't know that they're allergic to latex, so it's really important to test on usually I'll test on the part of somebody's a little bit of their wrist. Sometimes you can do it behind the ear. You just want to test it on a small area and just see if their skin reacts to it. If you are using latex and it's really hard to get off, that's kind of another sign that you could be allergic to it. It shouldn't be painful. Nothing that you're putting on should ever be painful or be burning. There's certain things that are going to feel a little bit weird when you put them on, they might feel heavy, your skin might be tightening, but there's no reason that something that you're putting on should be really intensely burning the skin or hurting the skin. If that is ever happening, you know that you're probably allergic, or your performer is allergic. So always think about that. You also have to think about where the injury is and where things are going to be going. So if they have a bloody nose, you cannot just use any kind of stage blood. You have to make sure that you're using one that's internal and that it can be ingested. If it's something going in or around the mouth, same thing. It has to be something that's safe to ingest in case they do. So even if they're going to spit it back out, or it's just going to be a trickle around their mouth and it's never supposed to go into their mouth, anything could happen, and you just want to make sure that you're accounting for that so that nobody gets hurt. I don't think if a little bit of blood were to get into someone's mouth, that anything would happen, but even with bloods that are internal and meant to be ingested, if you've, I've heard stories where people have popped a bunch of blood capsules at once because they thought it would be funny and they've gotten sick and vomited from it. So you just want to be really careful when you're using these things, just because they're not your everyday products and situations that you're going to run into. So you just have to always proceed with caution when you're using them. You also need to make sure that you're safe around people's eyes. So a lot of special effects products have heavy scents to them. They kind of smell like chemically, they're very strong. Anything with like alcohol or acetone in it is very, very strong. So you really want to keep that away from people's noses. You want to keep it away from the eyes. If you need some sort of like eye effect, so whether that's like a bloody eye or like an eye that's yellow or something like that, Krylon, and this is the only brand that I know of that makes it, they make eye blood, and they make like eye blood in several different colors. So if you need red, black, blue, green, yellow, they are the people that you want to go to for that. They are specially formulated drops that are safe to put in the eye. There are so many bloods that you probably see people using like on Instagram and TikTok and everything now too, and YouTube, where it is probably not safe to be in the places where they are putting it. So please make sure and understand that you are doing this for a production. This is a job, this is school, this is like professional and serious, so you have to treat it that way. You know, if you are just doing makeup on yourself to make a video or just to have fun, that's different, because you are the only person that you are putting in that situation. So if you do something and you get hurt, you know, like, you're only liable for yourself. But if you are being careless when you are working on someone else, that's other people are going to start getting affected. If you're being like reckless with allergies and you open something that you know there are people in the room that are allergic to, you could put a lot of people in danger. So you just want to make sure that you're always keeping that into consideration. And I think with like regular makeup, we don't think about it a lot, but once you get into special effects, you really do need to always take safety, make it a high priority. A lot of times I think in theater we don't give ourselves a lot of time to do things like that, but it is far better to take 5 extra minutes and test something on someone than to find out when they've been wearing it and have to take them off stage because it's burning their skin or something. So test adhesives, test bloods, test like products, anything you're going to put on. Always read ingredient labels. If you have anybody who's allergic to nuts, some nose and scar waxes have nuts in them. So it's Krylon's nose and scar wax has like peanut oil in it. There are primers that have almond oil in it. There's so many different products that might like sneak some kind of like tree nut or something into it that you just wouldn't think about. So you always have to read everything just so that you know that you are being as safe as possible. Sometimes things are going to happen. You don't always know if someone's going to be allergic, even if maybe if in the past they weren't and they think it's okay. Allergies do change over time. Weather conditions, like extreme weather conditions, can make your skin more sensitive to things too. So there are going to be some things that are beyond your control, but the things that are in your control, you should always take the time to just kind of figure out and to work with. Other things to kind of keep in mind when we're discussing like safety. So you want to make sure, obviously, that you're being as sanitary as possible. Sometimes with special effects stuff, you have to use your hands a little bit more than you would with some beauty makeup, because there's just certain ways that you have to lay things down, like as far as prosthetics are concerned, where sometimes we do have to touch the face. So sometimes that might mean that you're wearing gloves, or you're using a lot more like disposables than you might be used to using. You want to make sure that if you are giving people like bottles of adhesive, like I always see people will have these like at theaters and they'll just have like these big bottles of adhesive, and I feel like they just use it for show to show. You should not have multiple people using one brush. Just because they come with a brush and that's convenient does not mean that it's okay for every single person to use. Like, granted, like adhesives like this, like, yeah, they're strong, there's alcohol in it, maybe it's sanitizing it, but it's way better to pour things into individual containers or to use disposables to put things like that. So unless it is like your own personal adhesive, whatever brush is in there should only be touching your skin. If it is like a group adhesive, you need to be pouring it into different containers or using a disposable container, like treat it like a mascara every single time you dip into it, just to keep things as sanitary as possible. You want to make sure when you're working on people, if you're working or if not necessarily maybe when you're working on people, but if you are like making prosthetics or just like using certain paints and things, you need to be in a well-ventilated area. A lot of things, even if you're just like cleaning with really intense alcohol, if you have like a fume hood like at school or something or at your job, if you can clean under that, that's going to be better for you. A lot of us are having to wear masks now anyway, so that's probably not horrible, just because a lot of the things that you encounter in special effects, you really don't want to be breathing that in a lot. So the more kind of like deep into it and intense you get, the more you also have to be concerned about your own safety, just because a lot of things that might be like in an effects shop are not things that should necessarily be like touching your skin and getting inhaled and getting in your eyes. So you may want to have like your eyes protected, your mouth protected. Granted, a lot of us were required to do that now. That's something that I wouldn't expect to go away. So just kind of keep that in mind. A lot of times your brushes could get really destroyed by a lot of these things. I don't recommend ever using your finest brushes. Spirit gum doesn't really come out of brushes. Latex is not really going to come out of brushes. I use really cheap paint brushes a lot. I use like $1 brushes to give people for spirit gum and things because it's just not worth it to like use your finest foundation brushes and have them get destroyed by adhesives. Some brands like Delia make some really nice like adhesive brushes, things like that are made for adhesives, clean a little bit better, whereas your really expensive foundation brush probably won't. Sometimes the makeups that you're using stain a lot in special effects, especially if you're using like alcohol paints. If you're using your finest like pure white foundation brush, it may never go back to that color because these alcohol paints are really, really intense, and to get them out, you're going to have to dip it back into 99% alcohol, and that's going to mess up the bristles too. So there's just a lot more things I think that you have to kind of keep in mind and be aware of when you're doing special effects. Another thing that's really important, so you're not going to have this like probably in your home or like everywhere you work, but most schools should definitely have it. Most larger theaters and spaces, everybody should have like a flammable cabinet. So that's going to be like, usually it's like a big yellow cabinet. Anything that's flammable is supposed to be in there. It really needs to be in there. So that's spirit gum, that's alcohol, that's hairspray, that's a lot of things that you probably just like think of as like common table products because we have them out. But if you have a flammable cabinet, it's just better to use it just to be safe. So now that you kind of have all the like precautions and everything out of the way, you kind of have to start thinking about what kind of materials that you might be using for your injury makeup. So the first kind of decision that you have to make is whether you're going to do something that's like a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional design. So if it's like 2-dimensional, that just means that you're going to be painting the effect on. So that's going to be a lot of your like bruising. It might be like an age makeup because that's actually kind of considered like character special effects as well. You can paint on blood splatters. You can do a lot of things that are painted on. You just have to use your highlights and contours. So if you're going to do something that's more 2-dimensional, that's probably going to be something you do with cream paints or water activated paints or alcohol paints. You can even use powders depending on how strong the pigment is. If you're going to go 3-dimensional, that's when you have a lot more options. So sometimes that means that you're putting like a full prosthetic on someone. We're not going to go too deep into prosthetics or anything in this one. That will be later on, but you could be putting on a prosthetic or you could be building something onto someone. So I'm going to kind of talk about some of the things you could be using if you're building directly onto a person. So probably like one of the most like classic things, especially that we see in theater, is just going to be nose and scar wax. Ben Nye, Krylon, Mayron, those are usually the ones that you're going to be using. Be careful allergy-wise, like I said. Ben Nye one is pretty safe as far as I know with like nuts and everything, but I know with the Krylon one, there's supposedly peanut oil in that, so just be kind of careful. What's nice with Scar Wax from Ben Nye is they make a bunch of different colors in it, and Krylon's Cinewax, which is like a synthetic wax, which would be like the allergy-friendly version. They make a variety of colors as well as a clear, so you have options. You can actually use like cream paints to tint them if you need to, but nose and scar wax is great. You just have to make sure that if you are using it, you want to make sure you're not going to be working in an area that's too hot because it does react to heat, which can be great when you're trying to blend it onto the skin, but if it's too hot, it could melt off somebody's face. You want to have an adhesive under it just because it's not something that's it's not gonna hold on super well if someone's gonna be wearing it for a long time, so you kind of have to keep that in mind. It can be tricky to work with because it's really sticky, but I think if you're doing an effect where you're like gonna build a fake nose on someone or something like that, it works really well. It can get a little heavy though, so if it's going to be a wound that's going to be somewhere where someone's like emoting a lot, I don't really recommend it because I think it's a lot more likely to like fall off somebody's face, especially on stage. So that's one option. It's pretty inexpensive, so that's another reason that people like it too. Another option is gelatin. So gelatin, I know of like, so Krylon has like a gelatin that you can like heat up and use directly on the skin, and then I also have Mayron's. So what's cool with this, a lot of people make their own as well. What's cool though is you can just put it directly on the skin, so you don't need adhesive with it. It's very like skin safe and skin friendly, so that is good. But it's another one that does also react to heat, so if it's going to be like super hot, there's a chance that it might just melt off of someone. Something else that you have to keep in consideration when you're using gelatin though is that you have to heat it up, because in order for this bottle to become anything, because right now it's like totally solid, so this has to be heated up enough where this is going to be a liquid, and then you can like squeeze it out. So in order for that to happen, it has to get really, really hot. So it's really, you have to test it on a smaller part of the skin or something before you put it on. Or I've even seen people that will like make things on wax paper and then actually adhere it onto the skin. But be really careful when you're using this. Don't just squeeze a ton of it on your face or something, because you could possibly burn yourself, and you just want to be really careful about that. Another thing that's kind of a classic would just be liquid latex. So you can use this on its own. You can make the skin like wrinkle. You can do like cuts, wounds, anything. If you mix it with like cotton or tissue, it's going to give you texture a lot faster than if you're sitting there and kind of building it up, because latex can take a little bit to dry. Nose and scar wax, that's not going to be dry until you're ready for it to, because you have to seal it for it to really stay on. Gelatin sets up pretty quickly. Latex definitely takes a while. It turns clear. That's how you know that it's set. And then our last thing that we're going to talk about would be silicone, and silicone takes roughly like 5 to 7 minutes for like the 3 brands that I've used about to set up on the skin. But another quick note about latex, and really about any of these, you really, especially latex, do not put this over hair. If you put this over arm hair or eyebrows or something, you're probably going to rip it back out. Silicone is a little bit easier to get out. Spirit gum is not great to get out. That could also kind of rip out hair, so I don't really like to use nose and scar wax or something over hair. You can get wax back out of your hair, but it's really annoying, to be honest, to try to like peel it back out. So if I had to pick one that's the best to go over hair, that's not just like a prosthetic that you can like safely like coat your hair under it and keep it safe, I'd probably go silicone, but I really try to avoid it with everything. But latex is probably like the worst thing. So just be really careful when you're using latex, and also too, a ton of people are allergic to latex, so just be really careful. So another one, and this is my personal favorite, would be silicone. So this is Artex, and I also have 3rd degree as well. So I have the red 3rd degree, and then I just have like the regular Artex. I really, really love Artex and silicone in general, just because I think that it is just so much more flexible than latex or like gelatin. I haven't worked with a ton, I will say, just because I'm always paranoid about burning someone, so I don't want to speak too much on gelatin, because it's also like a pretty flexible product. But really, between like wax and latex, I do think that the silicone is just, it's so much more flexible. If you're gonna wear it for a really long time, like 18 hours or something, you might want a silicone adhesive under it, but it pretty much stands up really, really well to strenuous conditions on its own. It stays on. It's really flexible, so if somebody does have to have like a wound or like a scar or something around the mouth, I'm not afraid that it's gonna fall off. Whereas when someone's really heavily sweating and they have something glued on with spirit gum, or they're just like emoting a lot, that could make like the wax crack off. The latex might get kind of heavy. That might hurt their skin as it's starting to dry if they're emoting. It might peel. The spirit gum can sweat off, but the silicone, it just holds up really, really well. You can tint it really easily. I think it's a little bit less likely that someone's going to be allergic to this as opposed to latex, or even like there's quite a few people that are pretty sensitive to spirit gum as well, and a lot of times that's the only option that some places have, though there are other adhesives that we will talk about in a second. But I really love silicone. It's like my favorite thing. I think it just moves so well. I think it looks the most realistic. So huge fan of this. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's really, really great. And again, you can get Krylon's Artex, you can get Alcone's 3rd degree, or there's also, oh my gosh, who makes it? The product is called Skin Tight. Smooth On, there it goes. Like, I can't think of the brand. So Smooth On makes Skin Tight. That one can also be an adhesive, and you do need like a thickener called 5X with it usually if you're going to try to use it on the skin, because it's pretty thin. You can also pour these into molds to make prosthetics really quickly as well. You just want to make sure that you're using a mold release, but I do that all the time, and that's also like a great time saver as well. So cannot recommend silicone enough if you have not used that. So we can talk about now probably adhesives, since I kind of mentioned that. So spirit gum is definitely kind of like your like classic theater adhesive. Most people have probably used this. Most important thing to remember is that if you get one, and I have it somewhere, so if you get one, it's okay. So if you get one that's water soluble, or it's like a hydro spirit gum or something like that, that just means that soap and water are going to wash it off. So it doesn't require a remover, but that also means that it's not very strong, and it might not hold up to sweat very well, because that means that water's going to take it right off. So the second somebody starts sweating, whatever they're adhering could just come off. So I usually use that. I like to use that over hair, because I can cover somebody's brows with that, and I know that it's going to come back out. So I love it for that. Using it to adhere like small things like glitter, like little gemstones, or things that just don't have a lot of weight to them, and they might be more for like a photo shoot or like a fashion shoot. For people that are just starting out, I think that's better than using like a more intense spirit gum, just because you don't need the adhesive. If you just want to pick up something for Halloween that's easy, you can use it to adhere things. It just might not hang on forever, but then you'll also be able to use it for probably more of your beauty stuff, whereas like the more intense spirit gum you may not want to do that with. But certainly if you need something to stay on, you need to get the kind that has like alcohol and resin in it, is usually what it is. So there's just regular spirit gums. There's Mastix P, which is really good for lace front wigs that Krylon makes. There's like matte spirit gums. There's tons of different brands that make it. I haven't used all of them, but my personal favorites are usually either one of the Krylon ones or Ben Nye. Those I've had the most luck with in theater with getting facial hair to stay on. If you're still having a hard time, I think it is usually facial hair. Some people will actually use Pros-Aide for that, so you can use prosthetic adhesive to put down prosthetics, and you can also use it to put down lace front like facial hair and things if you need to. I've had people that preferred this. There's also cream Pros-Aide as well. So I really love Pros-Aide cream. It's so bright so you can't really see it, but I love Pros-Aide cream. Not only to like adhere things down, it's really great for blending edges. I hate trying to blend edges with latex, so most of the time on like latex prosthetics and things, if I have Pros-Aide cream, I use that. This is great for brows. It's good for people that sweat really heavily, so if spirit gum is not strong enough for what you're adhering down, I would move up to a Pros-Aide or a silicone adhesive. Silicone adhesive I don't have with me, but basically that's just like a really strong adhesive that's also really like skin safe too. They tend to be a little bit more expensive. Pros-Aide is probably usually a little bit cheaper, so that might be your next thing to try, and then silicone adhesive, but that's another really great product. Telesis is a really, really popular brand. Otherwise Krylon does make it as well, but I think a lot of theaters kind of like stick to Telesis, and there's different strengths of it too, so kind of depending on like what it is that you're doing, you can find the correct adhesive for you. But just because spirit gum won't stay on somebody doesn't mean that they can't wear something. You just kind of have to move on and look for other adhesives. You just want to make sure, number one, that whatever you're using, please have the remover for it. People always, I used to work at Krylon, and they would always try to just not buy the remover and think that they could just get it off, and like it is worth the extra money for the remover. I had somebody who one time like did not remove spirit gum from their ear, from an ear prosthetic, and it like blistered. So it's just really like not worth it to skip out on adhesives and removers. Like if you're gonna buy one, just get the other. It's just really important to do that. So make sure, again, if you're buying an adhesive, buy the remover for it. Have some kind of oily remover. If not, if you don't want to get a bunch of different ones, you're probably going to need some alcohol to cut it. Isopropyl myristate is a really good one. I also have something, what do I have? What is it? Mavidon. I always like pronounce it wrong. That's a really good one to help get off like Pros-Aide and everything. I like that adhesive. Krylon's Hydro Oil is really great. Scandinavia has like a spray that you can spray on that's super oily that will pull stuff off. But really you do need something that's going to cut through that adhesive. I usually start with like an oilier remover first, and then I kind of like move into something that is more intense, just because I don't want to put the super intense adhesives on the skin for longer than I have to. But I think it's nice, like use something oily, wipe off the blood, wipe off the makeup, and then sometimes the oil will kind of start to get under the edges of whatever it is that you're trying to remove, and that will help it like lift off. And then you can kind of like get in there with like a smaller brush or Q-tip or disposable or whatever with whatever the actual remover is, and then once whatever it is completely off, I always go over that area with the remover, and it's really good to like cleanse that area and moisturize it as well, just to make sure that you're kind of restoring what was there. Another product I don't have with me, but another thing, so if you ever have to make scars, a really popular thing for that if you're doing indented ones is rigid collodion. So rigid collodion is a really cool product, but it is really intense. So basically it is like, it goes on the skin, you just paint it on, it's a liquid, and it basically just kind of sucks your skin in and makes like an indented scar, so it can kind of do like the little like smiles that everyone does that were just like indents in. It looks super natural looking, but what happens is that it pulls so much moisture from your skin that it can get really like damaging. I've seen people whose faces have been scarred from it for a few days. If you're going to use it, you just need to be really careful. Test it somewhere first. I react really badly to it, and my arm's gotten like puffy from me using it before. So it's a really cool effect, but just be really careful. I was taught that you don't want to use it in the same place. Like you need to wait like 3 days in between. So if you're going to be using it for a show, you would need to like change the placement of it. I know shows that have used it and it's been fine, but I really do not recommend, if you are doing like a run of a show, that is what you use for your scars. I would have a prosthetic or make it out of something else. I think if it's for like a photo shoot or like a Halloween look or something, or like film, when you know there's going to be like, that's one day when you're wearing it and you can wait a few days before you're going to see it again. That's a different situation, but just use caution. It smells really strongly, so be careful with that. So watch out with that. If you're going to use like tear sticks or like a tear blower, that's basically just like a little either stick of menthol or someone's like blowing menthol. Probably not anymore with the pandemic, but you would like blow menthol into the eyes. That would make people cry. You really don't want to put it in your eye. People do that, but you're really just, it's meant to go like below the eye. Krylon makes those. That's another great place to get that kind of stuff. There's about a million different things that you could kind of branch off into in special effects, but that's some of the basics. Another big thing is blood. So it's kind of interesting because in theater, sometimes blood is handled by props and sometimes it's handled by makeup. It often kind of depends on like where it's coming from and like what it is on. So it may not always be your job. Sometimes it's been like a combo on things that I've worked on, but probably the most important thing to think of with blood in theater is just, does it have to wash out of something? So if it has to wash out of something, a lot of theaters actually make their own. I know on one show I worked on, I think we even had like detergent mixed into it to make sure that it would wash out. There's a lot of different brands. I think I'll do like a separate thing on blood because there's a lot to talk about with that, but just make sure, test it on whatever the fabrics are. Know how fast you have to get to it in order to wash it out, just because there are some bloods that once they hit like, not even just fabric, but sometimes like whatever's on the stage, like if there's furniture or like a certain like material that's on the stage or on the stage floor, it might not come off. So you need to know that before you use it. It might stain the skin really heavily, so you might need to put down a lot of like barrier creams on someone, or you may need to use something that doesn't stain if you have to get it off of them. Again, you want to pay attention to if it's like external or internal blood, if it has to go up the nose or around the nose or in the mouth, ingested anywhere around the mouth, you really want to use internal. Otherwise, if it's going to be anywhere else on the face, you can use an external one, but that cannot be ingested, and it cannot be like put up somebody's nose for a bloody nose effect. Again, if it needs to go around the eyes, that needs to be the specific eye blood, which I believe only Krylon makes at this point. So you just want to be safe when you're doing these kind of things, especially around the eyes and anywhere that you could be ingesting things. But again, I think, yeah, we'll go separate for like demos of everything and to talk more about blood. But that's just kind of like a quick little basic kind of like intro to injury and just things you have to take into consideration, products you might need, products you might run into, and hopefully that kind of helps clarify injury makeup for you.